morning air in downtown Seattle was cold and damp. Marcus Cole sat on his small wooden stool and looked at the old piano in front of him. The piano had seen better days. Its black paint was chipped in many places, showing the brown wood underneath. Some of the white keys were yellowed with age, and a few of the black keys had cracks running through them, but the piano still worked, and that was all that mattered to Marcus. He pulled his jacket tighter around his body. The jacket was thin and didn't do much to keep out the cold, but it was all he had. Marcus was 43 years old, though most people would guess he was older. His face had deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His hair was starting to turn gray at the sides. He hadn't shaved in several days, and his beard was rough and uneven. Marcus lifted the lid of the piano and placed his fingers on the keys. He didn't start playing right away. He just sat there for a moment, feeling the smooth surface of the keys under his fingertips. This was his favorite part of the day before the playing started, before the endless hours of trying to make people notice him. The street corner where Marcus set up his piano every day was busy. It was on 3rd Avenue, right outside a large coffee shop. People walked past all day long. Business people in nice suits, students with heavy backpacks, tourists looking at maps on their phones, mothers pushing strollers. Everyone was always in a hurry, always going somewhere important. Marcus started to play. His fingers moved across the keys, playing a simple song that most people would recognize. It was a pop song from a few years ago, something that used to play on the radio all the time. The melody was easy and pleasant. It was the kind of music that people could hum along to without really thinking about it. A few people glanced at Marcus as they walked past. One man slowed down for a second, seemed like he might stop. But then his phone rang and he kept walking. A woman smiled at Marcus but didn't stop. A teenager with headphones walked right past without even looking. This was normal. This was how most days went. Marcus kept playing. After the pop song, he played another one. Then another. He knew dozens of these songs by heart. Songs from the radio, songs from movies, songs that everyone had heard 1,000 times. He didn't particularly like most of these songs, but they were what people wanted to hear. For at least they were what people expected to hear from a street performer. After about an hour, Marcus's tip jar had $3 and some coins in it. The tip jar was actually an old coffee can that Marcus had covered with paper. He had written "thank you" on the paper in black marker. The writing was neat and careful, like everything Marcus did. The morning dragged on. More people walked past. More people ignored him. A few people dropped coins into the jar. One kind older man put a $5 bill in, which made Marcus smile and nod his thanks. But mostly people just walked by. Marcus watched them all. He had been doing this for so long that he could tell what kind of person someone was just by watching them walk. The business people always walked fast, their faces serious and focused. They rarely looked at street performers. The tourists walked slower and looked around more, but they were usually too confused about where they were going to stop for music. The students were sometimes generous, but most of them didn't have much money to spare. Around 11 o'clock, Marcus saw someone he recognized. It was a woman who walked past his corner almost every day. She was in her early 30s, Marcus guessed. She always wore nice business clothes and carried a leather bag over her shoulder. Her name was Sarah, though Marcus didn't know that. He had never spoken to her. Sarah walked the same route every day. She left the tall office building 3 blocks down, walked to the coffee shop right behind Marcus, got her coffee, and walked back to her office. Sometimes she put $1 in Marcus's tip jar, sometimes she didn't. It seemed to depend on what kind of day she was having. Today, Sarah stopped at the coffee shop and came out a few minutes later with a large cup. She had her phone pressed to her ear and was talking quickly. Marcus could tell she was stressed about something. She walked past him without looking, without putting anything in the tip jar. Marcus didn't mind. He understood. Everyone had their own problems to worry about. Marcus's hands were starting to hurt. Playing piano for hours every day was hard on the body. His fingers ached. His back hurt from sitting on the small stool. His shoulders were tight and sore. But he kept playing because that was his job. This was how he made money to survive. At noon, Marcus took a break. He stood up slowly, feeling his knees crack. He walked to the corner store and bought a sandwich and a bottle of water. The sandwich cost $4. Marcus ate it sitting on a bench near his piano, watching people walk past. He thought about how strange it was that he could sit here in the middle of thousands of people and still feel completely alone. When Marcus was younger, he had never imagined his life would turn out this way. He had never imagined he would be a street performer, playing simple songs on a broken piano for strangers who barely noticed him. But life didn't always go the way people planned. Marcus knew that better than anyone. After his break, Marcus went back to the piano. The afternoon was usually busier than the morning. More people meant more chances for tips. Marcus played song after song, his fingers moving automatically across the keys. He didn't even have to think about what he was playing anymore. His hands just knew what to do. A group of teenagers stopped to watch him for a minute. They took a video on their phones, probably to post on social media. Marcus was used to this. People often took videos or photos of him. He was part of the scenery of the city, something interesting to show their friends. None of the teenagers put any money in the tip jar. When they were done with their video, they walked away, laughing and talking. Marcus didn't feel angry about this. He didn't feel much of anything about it. It was just how things were. The sky was starting to get darker. The days were getting shorter as winter approached. Marcus knew he only had a few more hours before it would be too dark and too cold to keep playing. He looked at his tip jar. He had made about $23 so far. On a good day, he could make $40 or even $50. On a bad day, he made less than $20. Today was looking like an average day. Around 3 o'clock, the rain started. It was a light rain at first, just a drizzle. Marcus kept playing. Seattle was always rainy, and if he stopped playing every time it rained, he would never make any money. He was lucky that his spot had a small awning over it, part of the coffee shop's entrance. It kept most of the rain off him and the piano. But as the afternoon went on, the rain got heavier. People started walking faster, holding newspapers or bags over their heads. Fewer people stopped at the coffee shop. Fewer people walked slowly enough to notice Marcus. The street started to empty out. Marcus's fingers were cold now. The rain made everything damp and chilly. He could see his breath in the air. He played a slow, sad song, something that matched the gray, rainy afternoon. He wasn't even sure what the song was called. It was just a melody that had been in his head. A man in an expensive raincoat walked past quickly, not looking at Marcus. A woman with an umbrella hurried by. 2 college students ran past, laughing as they tried to escape the rain. Marcus thought about packing up and going home. But home wasn't much better than here. Home was a small room in a rundown building on the edge of downtown. It was cold and damp and lonely. At least here, on the street corner, Marcus felt like he was part of something, even if people ignored him. At least here, there was music. So he kept playing. The rain continued. The street got quieter. The sky got darker. Marcus's tip jar now had about $28 in it. Not great, but enough. Enough for food for the next couple of days. Enough for the small amount of rent he had to pay. Enough to survive. Marcus played another song, then another. His hands moved automatically. His mind wandered. He thought about the past, about all the choices that had led him to this street corner. He thought about the future, about tomorrow, when he would come back to this same spot and do the same thing all over again. He thought about music, about how strange it was that something so beautiful could also be so ordinary, that something that used to mean everything to him could become just a way to make a few dollars on a rainy afternoon. A taxi drove past, splashing water from a puddle. A dog barked somewhere nearby. The coffee shop's door opened and closed as a customer went inside. Life continued around Marcus, busy and loud and completely indifferent to him. Marcus finished another song and paused. His fingers rested on the keys. He was tired, so tired, not just from today, but from all the days that had come before it, all the days of being invisible, all the days of playing music that no one really listened to. But tomorrow he would be back. Tomorrow he would sit on this same stool and play the same songs and hope for the same few dollars. Because this was his life now. This was what he did. This was who he had become. A street performer on a rainy corner in Seattle. A man with a broken piano and a coffee can full of change. A musician that nobody noticed. Marcus took a deep breath and started to play again. Thursday afternoon arrived with the same gray clouds that seemed to always hang over Seattle in late autumn. Marcus was at his usual spot on 3rd Avenue, his fingers moving through another familiar pop song. The cold was getting worse each day and he could feel it in his joints. His hands were stiff, making it harder to play smoothly. The tip jar was having a slow day. Only $15 after 4 hours of playing. Marcus tried not to think about it too much. Worrying didn't help. It never did. The lunch rush had passed. The street was quieter now, with just a few people walking here and there. Marcus played softly, barely paying attention to the music. His mind was somewhere else, thinking about whether he had enough money for groceries this week. Then he noticed someone standing near him. Not walking past like everyone else, actually standing still, watching him. Marcus glanced up quickly. It was an older woman, probably in her 70s. She wore a long coat that looked expensive, the kind of coat that was well made and would last for years. Her white hair was pulled back neatly. She had a silk scarf around her neck. Everything about her spoke of careful attention and dignity. The woman didn't look like Marcus's usual audience. She looked out of place on this busy street corner. She held a small umbrella even though it wasn't raining at the moment. She stood very still, just watching Marcus play. Marcus felt uncomfortable. He wasn't used to people really looking at him. Most people glanced at him for a second or two and then looked away. But this woman was studying him carefully, her eyes focused on his hands as they moved across the keys. He finished the song he was playing and paused. The woman stepped closer. "You play very well," she said. Her voice was gentle but clear. She spoke like someone who was used to being heard, used to people listening to what she had to say. "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said. He wasn't sure what else to say. Compliments made him nervous. The woman smiled slightly. "Do you take requests?" "Sure," Marcus said. "What would you like to hear?" Most people asked for songs they knew from the radio. Sometimes they asked for birthday songs or holiday music. Marcus was ready to play whatever she wanted. The woman tilted her head slightly. "Do you know any Rachmaninoff?" Marcus's hands froze. He stared at the woman for a moment, trying to understand if he had heard her correctly. Rachmaninoff. She was asking for Rachmaninoff, on a street corner, from a street performer. Marcus started to speak but stopped. His throat felt tight. "That's pretty complicated," he finally said. "I know," the woman said. She didn't look away. "But something about the way you play made me wonder. Your hand position, the way you hold your wrists. You've had training, haven't you?" Marcus felt his heart beating faster. He didn't want to have this conversation. He didn't want to think about training, about the past, about everything he had lost. "I know some simple songs," he said, trying to smile. "Pop music. Classic rock, some jazz. How about I play you something nice and easy?" The woman didn't seem bothered by his deflection. She just kept watching him with those calm, intelligent eyes. "What about anything classical?" she asked. "Anything at all. Whatever you'd like to play." Marcus felt something twist inside his chest. It had been so long, so many years since he had played real music, real classical music. The kind of music that required everything from a person, the kind of music that could break your heart. "I don't really do that anymore," Marcus said quietly. "But you could if you wanted to," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Marcus looked down at the piano keys. They were old and worn. Some of them stuck a little when you pressed them. This wasn't a concert piano. This wasn't even a good piano. It was a broken instrument for a broken musician. "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why do you want to hear that kind of music?" "From me? Here?" The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because I think you need to play it, and I would like to hear it." There was something in her voice that made Marcus look up at her again. She wasn't mocking him. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely wanted to hear him play. Marcus felt afraid, more afraid than he had felt in years. Playing pop songs on a street corner was safe. It didn't mean anything. It didn't touch the parts of him that still hurt. But playing real music, classical music, the music he used to love, that would be different. That would wake up everything he had been trying to keep asleep. "I'm not sure this piano is good enough for Rachmaninoff," Marcus said, looking for any excuse. The woman smiled. "The piano will be fine. The question is whether you're ready." Marcus's hands were shaking slightly. He put them in his lap so she wouldn't see. But she probably already knew. She seemed to know a lot about him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere on a rainy afternoon. "I might not remember it very well," Marcus said. "It's been a long time." "That's all right," the woman said. "Just try." Marcus took a deep breath. He looked around the street. There weren't many people nearby. Most of them were inside the shops, avoiding the cold. This was as private as it was going to get. He lifted his hands and placed them on the keys. His fingers found the starting position almost automatically, like they remembered even though Marcus's brain was telling him to stop, to just play another pop song and let this woman go on her way. But something in him wanted to try. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just loneliness, and this woman was the first person in years who had really seen him, really looked at him as a musician instead of just a street performer. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. He thought about the music. He thought about Rachmaninoff, about the complex, beautiful, heartbreaking pieces he used to play. His fingers remembered the patterns. They remembered the feeling of playing real music. He opened his eyes and started to play. The first few notes were tentative. Marcus wasn't sure the piano could handle it. He wasn't sure he could handle it. But as his fingers moved, something started to happen. The music began to come back to him. Not perfectly, not the way it used to be, but it was there, buried under years of pop songs and simple melodies. He played carefully, testing each phrase. The piano responded better than he expected. The old instrument seemed to wake up, to remember what it was made for. The notes filled the air around them, complex and layered and rich. Marcus could feel his heart pounding. His hands remembered things his mind had forgotten. The way to phrase a melody. The way to bring out the bass line. The way to make the piano sing. A few people on the street stopped walking. They turned to look at the source of the music. This wasn't background noise anymore. This wasn't elevator music. This was something real. Marcus played for maybe 2 minutes. It wasn't a complete piece. He couldn't remember all of it. But it was enough. Enough to show what he could do. Enough to show who he used to be. When he stopped, his hands were shaking badly. He put them in his lap again. He felt exposed, like he had just shown this stranger his deepest secrets. The woman had tears in her eyes. She wiped them away gently with one gloved hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "That was beautiful." Marcus didn't know what to say. He felt raw inside, like someone had opened an old wound. A few of the people who had stopped to listen started to clap. Marcus looked up in surprise. There were maybe 6 or 7 people standing there watching him. One man put a $20 bill in the tip jar. A woman put in a 10. They clapped for a few more seconds and then went on their way. But the older woman stayed. She stepped closer to the piano and looked at Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. "How long has it been?" she asked. "Since what?" Marcus asked, though he knew what she meant. "Since you played music like that." Real music, Marcus thought about lying. But there didn't seem to be any point. "About 12 years, he said. The woman nodded slowly. "And before that? Where did you study?" Marcus hesitated. This conversation was going places he didn't want to go. But the woman waited patiently, and something about her made him want to answer. "Juilliard," he said quietly. "A long time ago." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Juilliard," she repeated. She looked at him with new interest. "What happened?" Marcus shook his head. "Life happened. Things fell apart. It's not important anymore." "It seems important," the woman said gently. Marcus felt angry suddenly. Who was this woman to come here and dig up his past? Who was she to make him play music that hurt to play? He was fine with his simple songs and his coffee can of tips. He was surviving. That was enough. "I should get back to work," Marcus said, his voice harder now. "Was there anything else you wanted to hear?" The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She handed it to Marcus. "My name is Helen Patterson," she said. "I used to teach at Juilliard piano. I retired 5 years ago, but I still stay involved with the music community here in Seattle." Marcus took the card automatically. His mind was spinning. She had taught at Juilliard. She knew what he was talking about. She understood. "I organize a benefit concert every year," Helen continued. "It raises money for music education programs for kids who can't afford lessons. The next concert is in 6 weeks. Marcus started to shake his head, but Helen held up her hand. "Just think about it," she said. "We're always looking for performers. Just one piece. Something you love. Something you want to play." "I can't," Marcus said immediately. I can't perform anymore. This is different. This is just street playing. A real concert, I can't." "Why not?" Helen asked simply. Marcus had 1,000 reasons. Because he would fail. Because he would freeze on stage. Because everyone would see how far he had fallen. Because the fear would eat him alive. Because he wasn't that person anymore. The person who could perform, who could handle the pressure and the expectations. I just can't, he said. Helen nodded. She didn't push. The card has my number on it. If you change your mind, call me. We would be honored to have you. She put a $50 bill in the tip jar. For the Rachmaninoff, she said with a small smile. Then she opened her umbrella and walked away, disappearing into the gray afternoon crowd. Marcus sat at his piano holding her business card. His hands had finally stopped shaking. He looked at the card for a long time, reading the neat printing. Helen Patterson, music educator. There was a phone number and an email address. Marcus put the card in his jacket pocket. He told himself he would throw it away later. He told himself he would never call. He told himself this changed nothing. But his hands found the piano keys again, and this time, instead of playing a pop song, he played something classical, something small and simple and beautiful, something that reminded him of who he used to be. Marcus tried to forget about Helen Patterson and her business card. He tried to go back to his normal routine. Wake up, go to the street corner, play simple songs, collect tips, go home, sleep, repeat, but it wasn't working. Something had changed inside him when he played that piece for Helen. It was like a door had opened, and now Marcus couldn't close it no matter how hard he tried. At night, lying in his small room, he would think about the music, real music, the kind he used to play, the kind that made his heart beat faster and his hands move like they had a mind of their own. He would hear melodies in his head, complex and beautiful, and his fingers would move against the thin blanket as if playing invisible keys. During the day, sitting at his piano on 3rd Avenue, Marcus would catch himself starting to play classical pieces instead of pop songs. He would stop quickly and switch back to something simple, but it kept happening. His hands wanted to play real music now. They were tired of the simple songs. A week passed after he met Helen. Marcus kept her business card in his jacket pocket. He told himself he was going to throw it away, but every time he reached for it, he couldn't quite do it. He would take it out, look at it, and then put it back in his pocket. Sarah, the businesswoman who walked past every day, noticed something different about Marcus. She couldn't quite say what it was. Maybe he sat up a little straighter. Maybe the music sounded slightly different. She found herself stopping to listen more often, even when she was in a hurry. One morning, Sarah actually stopped next to Marcus's piano. She stood there for a full minute listening. Marcus was playing something she didn't recognize. It wasn't a pop song. It was something slower and more complicated, something that made her feel sad and hopeful at the same time. When the song ended, Sarah put $5 in the tip jar. Marcus looked up and nodded his thanks. Their eyes met for just a second. Sarah wanted to say something, to ask him about the music, but she didn't know what to say, so she just smiled and walked away. But the moment stayed with her all day. There was something about the way Marcus had played that morning. Something different. Something real. Marcus watched her go. He realized he had been playing one of the pieces he used to love, a short work by Chopin. He hadn't even meant to. His hands had just started playing it. He looked down at the keys and felt that familiar mixture of joy and pain. Joy because the music felt so good. Pain because it reminded him of everything he had lost. 2 weeks after meeting Helen, Marcus made a decision. It was a small decision, but it felt huge. He decided to start practicing. Really practicing. Not just playing songs for tips, but actually working on difficult pieces the way he used to when he was a student. The problem was where to practice. His piano on the street corner was okay, but it wasn't good enough for serious practice. And he couldn't practice there all the time anyway. He needed the street time to make money. Marcus remembered that there was a community center a few blocks from his apartment. He had walked past it many times, but had never gone inside. One day, after finishing his work on the street, he went to check it out. The community center was old and run down, but it was warm inside. A tired-looking woman sat at the front desk. She looked up when Marcus came in. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Do you have a piano here?" Marcus asked. "One that people can use?" The woman nodded. "We have one in the activity room. It's pretty old, but it works. You can use it during open hours. Just sign in at the desk." "How much does it cost?" Marcus asked. "It's free," the woman said. "This is a community center. Everything here is free for the community." Marcus felt a small burst of hope. Free. He could practice for free. The woman showed him to the activity room. It was a large space with folding chairs stacked against the walls and a few tables in the corner. And in the middle of the room there was an upright piano. It looked even older than Marcus's street piano, but when he pressed a few keys, it sounded better. It was in tune or close enough. You can use it any time we're open, the woman said. Monday through Friday, 6 in the morning until 9 at night. Weekends are shorter hours, Marcus thanked her. That night he came back to the community center. The activity room was empty. He sat down at the piano and started to practice. It was hard at first. His fingers were stiff from playing simple songs all the time. His technique had gotten sloppy. He had forgotten some of the pieces he used to know by heart. But slowly, gradually, it started to come back. Marcus practiced for 2 hours that first night. His hands hurt by the end, but it was a good kind of hurt. The kind that came from really working, really pushing himself. He felt more alive than he had in years. He started going to the community center every night. After spending his days playing pop songs on the street corner, he would spend his evenings working on classical pieces. Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart, all the composers he used to love. The practicing was hard work. Sometimes Marcus would work on a single passage for an hour, playing it over and over until his fingers knew it perfectly. Sometimes he would get frustrated and want to give up, but he kept going. 3 weeks after meeting Helen, Marcus took her business card out of his pocket and looked at it again. He sat in his small room holding the card, thinking about her offer to play at the benefit concert. Part of him wanted to call her. Part of him wanted to try. But the fear was still there, as strong as ever. The fear of failing. The fear of standing on a stage in front of people and freezing up. The fear of everyone seeing how broken he really was. Marcus put the card on his small table and stared at it. He thought about his life. He thought about sitting on that street corner day after day, year after year, playing music that didn't matter. He thought about getting older, getting more tired, until one day he wouldn't be able to do it anymore. Was this really how he wanted his life to go? Was this really all there was? Marcus picked up the card again. Before he could change his mind, he pulled out his phone and dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times. Then Helen's voice answered. "Hello? Miss Patterson?" Marcus said. His voice was shaking. "This is Marcus Cole. We met a few weeks ago on 3rd Avenue. You asked me if I would play at your benefit concert." There was a pause. Then Helen said, "Marcus." "Yes, of course I remember. I'm so glad you called." "I was thinking," Marcus said. He had to force the words out. "Maybe I could play. Just one piece, if the offer is still open." "The offer is absolutely still open," Helen said. Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "I would be honored to have you perform. When can we meet to discuss the details?" They arranged to meet at a coffee shop the next afternoon. When Marcus hung up the phone, his hands were shaking again. He had done it. He had actually said yes. Part of him wanted to call back and take it back. But he didn't. He sat there in his room, staring at the wall, trying to understand what he had just agreed to. The next day, Marcus met Helen at the coffee shop. It was a small, quiet place, not the big chain shop near his street corner. Helen was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of tea. "I hope you like tea," she said when Marcus sat down. "I took the liberty of ordering for both of us." "Tea is fine," Marcus said. "Thank you." They talked for a long time. Helen told him about the benefit concert. It was for a program that gave free music lessons to kids whose families couldn't afford them. The concert was held every year at a small performance hall in downtown Seattle. About 200 people usually attended. 200 people, Marcus repeated. He felt sick to his stomach. Helen looked at him with understanding. "I know it sounds like a lot, but once you start playing, you'll forget about the audience. You'll just be focused on the music." Marcus wanted to believe her, but he wasn't sure he could. The last time he had performed in front of people more than 12 years ago, it had gone terribly wrong. He had frozen on stage, his mind going blank, his hands refusing to move. The humiliation had been overwhelming. It was part of what had driven him away from music, away from everything. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said quietly. "I have a history of stage fright. Bad stage fright. It's part of why I stopped performing." Helen nodded. "A lot of musicians struggle with performance anxiety. But you've been playing on the street for years. That's a kind of performing." "It's different," Marcus said. "On the street, nobody really cares. Nobody is expecting anything. If I mess up, it doesn't matter. But on a stage in front of people who paid to be there, it's different. What if we start small? Helen suggested. What if you come to my house and play for just me? We can work up from there. Small groups of people. Then maybe a few more. By the time the concert comes, you'll be more comfortable. Marcus thought about this. It made sense. Baby steps. He could do baby steps. Okay, he said. I can try that. Helen smiled. Good. And Marcus, what piece would you like to play at the concert? Have you thought about it? Marcus had thought about it a lot. There was one piece that kept coming back to him. A piece he used to love. A piece that said everything he wanted to say but didn't have words for. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, Marcus said. Helen's eyes lit up. That's a challenging piece. Are you sure? I'm sure, Marcus said. It's the right piece. I just need to practice it. Then practice it, Helen said. And when you're ready, come play it for me. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into practicing. Every night at the community center, he worked on the Rachmaninoff Prelude. It was a difficult piece, filled with complex chords and demanding passages. But Marcus had played it before many years ago. His hands still remembered it. During the day, on his street corner, Marcus found himself caring less about tips and more about music. He still played pop songs, but he mixed in classical pieces too. Some people walked past without noticing the difference, but some people stopped. Some people really listened. Sarah was one of them. She had started taking a longer route to the coffee shop, just so she could walk past Marcus. She would stand there for a few minutes each day, listening. She never spoke to him. She wasn't sure what she would say, but the music moved her in a way that surprised her. One day, Sarah looked Marcus up on the internet. She typed "street performer 3rd Avenue Seattle piano" into a search engine. She didn't find anything about Marcus specifically, but she found articles about street musicians in general. She read about how many of them were classically trained, how many of them had full lives and stories that people never knew about. Sarah wondered about Marcus's story. She wondered what had brought him to that street corner. She wondered what he thought about while he played. She wondered if he knew that his music made her days better, made her feel something real in the middle of her busy corporate life. Marcus didn't know any of this. He was too focused on his practicing, on preparing for the concert. Helen had invited him to her house to play for her, and that day was getting closer. Marcus was terrified. The night before he was supposed to go to Helen's house, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with fears and doubts. What if he failed? What if he couldn't do it? What if all this practicing had been for nothing? But underneath the fear, there was something else. A small flame of hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. Maybe he could be a musician again. A real musician, not just a street performer that nobody noticed. Marcus thought about the music. He thought about how it felt to really play, to put everything into a piece and make it come alive. He thought about the Rachmaninoff Prelude, about its dark beauty and emotional power. And for the first time in many years, Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe his story wasn't over yet. Maybe there was still more music left in him. Maybe it wasn't too late for a second chance. Helen's house was in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Seattle. It was a beautiful old home with a front garden and tall windows. Marcus stood outside for a full minute before he could make himself knock on the door. His heart was pounding. His hands were sweating. He almost turned around and left 3 times. But finally he knocked. Helen opened the door almost immediately, as if she had been waiting right there. She smiled warmly at him. "Marcus, welcome. Please come in." The inside of Helen's house was warm and filled with light. There were bookshelves everywhere filled with books about music. Framed photographs hung on the walls, pictures of Helen with various musicians and students over the years. A beautiful grand piano sat in the living room, its black surface polished and gleaming. Marcus stared at the piano. He hadn't played a real grand piano in years. His street piano was barely functional, and the one at the community center was an old upright. But this was a professional instrument, the kind that musicians dreamed about. "Go ahead," Helen said gently. "Try it out." Marcus walked slowly to the piano. He sat down on the bench. It was the right height, perfectly positioned. His feet found the pedals naturally. He lifted the lid and looked at the keys. They were perfect, pristine, exactly aligned. He placed his hands on the keys and pressed down gently. The sound that came out was rich and full and beautiful. This piano was alive in a way that his street piano could never be. This piano could sing. It's beautiful, Marcus said quietly. It was my retirement gift to myself, Helen said. I taught for 40 years. I figured I deserved a really good piano. She sat down in a chair near the piano. Play for me, Marcus. Whatever you'd like. Don't worry about mistakes. This is just practice. Marcus took a deep breath. His hands were shaking slightly. This was the moment. This was where he would find out if he could actually do this, if he could play for someone who was really listening, really judging. He started with something simple, a Mozart piece that he knew well. His fingers moved across the keys, finding the melody. The piano responded beautifully to his touch. As Marcus played, he started to relax a little. The music helped. It always did. When he finished the Mozart, Helen nodded. That was lovely. You have wonderful technique. I can tell you had excellent training. A long time ago, Marcus said. Technique doesn't disappear, Helen said. It's like riding a bicycle. Your hands remember. There's more to performing than technique, Marcus said. He thought about his last concert, about how his technique hadn't saved him when his mind went blank. That's true, Helen agreed. There's also emotion, connection, the ability to tell a story through music. Would you like to try the Rachmaninoff? Marcus's mouth went dry. I'm not sure I'm ready. There's no pressure, Helen said. This is just us. Just you and me and the music. No audience. No judgment. Just play. Marcus looked down at the keys. The Rachmaninoff prelude was difficult. It required power and precision and deep emotion. He had been practicing it every night, but he still wasn't confident. But he had come this far. He might as well try. Marcus placed his hands in the starting position. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the music in his head. Then he began to play. The opening chords were dark and heavy like church bells ringing. Marcus's hands moved with power and control. The grand piano could handle the loud dynamics in a way his street piano never could. The sound filled the room, rich and overwhelming. As Marcus played, something happened. He stopped thinking about Helen listening. He stopped thinking about his fear. He just focused on the music. The melody poured out of him, each phrase carefully shaped, each dynamic change intentional. This was the music he loved. This was why he had become a musician in the first place. There was a difficult passage in the middle of the piece, a section where both hands had to move quickly across the keyboard. Marcus had been struggling with it in practice. But now, on this beautiful piano, it came easier. His fingers flew across the keys. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. Marcus played with growing confidence. He let himself feel the emotion of the piece, the darkness and the beauty and the yearning. He put everything into it, all the pain of the last 12 years, all the loss, all the regret, but also the hope that maybe it wasn't too late. When he played the final chords and let them fade into silence, Marcus kept his hands on the keys for a moment. He was breathing hard. His heart was racing, but he felt alive, more alive than he had felt in years. He looked up at Helen. She had tears running down her face. She wiped them away and smiled at him. That was extraordinary, she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. Marcus, that was truly extraordinary. Marcus felt something break open inside him. He had done it. He had played the piece all the way through. And it had been good. He knew it had been good. There were some mistakes, he said. I didn't hear any mistakes, Helen said. I heard a musician pouring his heart out. I heard someone who loves music playing a piece that means something to him. That's what matters. She stood up and walked over to the piano. She put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. Can I tell you something? She asked. I've been teaching and listening to musicians for over 40 years. I've heard hundreds of pianists play that piece, but very few of them played it the way you just did. Very few of them had that kind of emotional depth. Marcus didn't know what to say. He felt overwhelmed. I think, Helen continued, that the years you spent away from music, as painful as they were, have given you something. They've given you life experience. They've given you depth. When you play now, you're not just a young student showing off technique. You're a person who has lived and suffered and survived. That comes through in the music. Marcus thought about this. He had always seen his time on the streets as a waste, as a failure. But maybe Helen was right. Maybe those years had taught him something. Maybe they had made him a better musician, not a worse one. Tell me about what happened, Helen said gently. You said you studied at Juilliard. What happened after that? Marcus didn't usually talk about his past. But sitting here in Helen's living room, with the piano in front of him and the echo of the Rachmaninoff still in his ears, he found himself wanting to tell her. I was a good student, he said. Not the best, but good. I got into Juilliard on scholarship. It was my dream come true. I worked so hard. He paused, remembering those years. The endless hours of practice. The competition with other students. The pressure to be perfect. I had bad stage fright, Marcus continued. Even back then. But I could usually manage it. Until my senior recital. That was the big one, the one that scouts and agents came to. The one that could launch your career. Marcus's hands clenched on the piano keys. I walked out on stage and froze. Completely froze. I couldn't remember the first notes. I couldn't make my hands move. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, which felt like an hour. Then I got up and walked off the stage. Helen listened quietly, her face full of understanding. After that, I couldn't perform anymore, Marcus said. Every time I tried, the same thing would happen. I would freeze. The fear would take over. I graduated from Juilliard, but I couldn't do the one thing a musician needs to do, which is perform. What did you do? Helen asked. I tried to teach for a while, but that didn't work out. I was too depressed, too angry. Then my mother got sick, cancer. I went home to take care of her. She died 2 years later. By then I had no money, no job, no career. I ended up on the streets, and the piano on the street corner was the only thing I knew how to do. Marcus felt tears in his own eyes now. He wiped them away angrily. 12 years of playing pop songs for change. 12 years of being invisible. That's my story. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and now you're here, playing Rachmaninoff in my living room, getting ready to perform at a benefit concert. That's also your story. I'm terrified, Marcus admitted. I'm terrified that I'll freeze again, that I'll fail again. You might, Helen said. Marcus looked at her in surprise. He had expected her to tell him everything would be fine. I'm serious, Helen said. You might freeze. You might make mistakes. You might not play perfectly. But Marcus, that's true for every musician. Every single one of us who steps on stage takes that risk. She sat down on the piano bench next to him. The question is whether the music is worth the risk. Whether sharing what you have inside you is worth the possibility of failing. Marcus looked at the piano keys. He thought about the music. He thought about how it felt to really play, to connect with something larger than himself. It's worth it, he said quietly. Then you'll be fine, Helen said. Over the next few weeks, Marcus came to Helen's house twice a week to practice. Each time he played the Rachmaninoff for her. Each time it got a little better. His confidence grew. He started to believe that maybe he could actually do this. Helen also invited a few people to listen. First, it was just her husband, a quiet man who listened with closed eyes and clapped enthusiastically. Then it was a friend from the music community. Then it was 3 friends, then 5. Each time Marcus was nervous, but each time he managed to play through the piece. It wasn't always perfect, but it was always honest. He learned to focus on the music instead of the fear. He learned to let the piano carry him through the difficult moments. Sarah continued to walk past Marcus's street corner every day. She noticed that he seemed different now. He sat up straighter. He smiled more. The music he played had more energy, more passion. She didn't know what had changed, but she was glad for it. One day, Sarah saw a flyer on a bulletin board near her office. It was advertising a benefit concert for music education. She recognized the date, which was coming up in 2 weeks. On a whim, she bought a ticket. She didn't know why exactly. Maybe she just wanted to support music education, or maybe she wanted to do something different with her evening. She didn't make the connection to Marcus. She didn't know he would be there. It was just a coincidence. Marcus, meanwhile, was practicing harder than ever. The concert was 2 weeks away, then 1 week, then just a few days. His fear came back in waves. Sometimes he felt confident. Sometimes he felt like he was going to throw up. Helen stayed calm and encouraging. You're ready, she told him. You've practiced. You've played for people. You know this piece inside and out. Trust yourself. The night before the concert, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his small room, his mind racing. Tomorrow night he would stand on a stage in front of 200 people. He would play the Rachmaninoff Prelude, the piece that meant everything to him. He would either succeed or fail. There was no middle ground. Marcus got out of bed and sat on the floor. He closed his eyes and imagined the music. He heard it in his head, every note, every phrase. He let it wash over him, and slowly, very slowly, he started to feel calm. The music was bigger than his fear. The music was what mattered. If he could just focus on that, maybe everything else would take care of itself. Tomorrow he would find out. The day of the concert arrived gray and cold. Marcus woke up early, his stomach in knots. He couldn't eat breakfast. He tried to practice at the community center, but his hands were too shaky. Finally, he just went for a long walk, trying to calm his nerves. The concert was at 7 in the evening. Marcus spent the afternoon getting ready. He had bought a suit from a thrift store the week before. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and it fit reasonably well. He shaved carefully. He combed his hair. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. He looked like a musician again. He looked like someone who belonged on a stage. At 5 o'clock, Marcus took the bus to the performance hall. It was a small venue, older and elegant, with red velvet seats and gold decorations on the walls. Helen met him at the back entrance. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Good," Helen said. "That means you care. Come on, let me show you the piano." They walked onto the stage. The hall was empty, the seats waiting for the audience that would arrive in an hour. In the center of the stage was a beautiful grand piano, even nicer than Helen's. Marcus sat down at it and played a few scales. The piano was perfectly tuned, responsive, wonderful. Under different circumstances, he would have been thrilled. But right now, all he could think about was the fact that in 2 hours he would have to play on this piano in front of 200 people. "There will be 4 other performers tonight," Helen explained. "You're third on the program, so you'll have some time to settle in before you play." Marcus nodded. He wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. "There's a green room backstage where you can wait," Helen continued. "And Marcus, just remember what we talked about. Focus on the music. Let everything else fall away." "I'll try," Marcus said. By 6:30, the hall was starting to fill with people. Marcus watched from backstage, peeking through a gap in the curtain. He saw couples in nice clothes, families with children, older people who looked like they loved classical music, all of them taking their seats, chatting and laughing, waiting for the concert to start. Marcus felt his heart racing. His hands were cold and clammy. The fear was rising in him like a wave. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe slowly. What if he froze again? What if he walked out on that stage and couldn't play? What if everyone saw him fail? A young woman appeared at his side. She was one of the other performers, a violinist who looked about 25. "First time performing in a while?" she asked kindly. "Is it that obvious?" Marcus asked. "You look like you're about to pass out," she said with a small smile. "I get nervous too. Everyone does. It helps me to remember that the audience wants us to succeed. They're not here hoping we'll fail. They're here because they love music." Marcus thought about this. It helped a little. At 7 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The audience quieted down. Helen walked out onto the stage. She spoke into a microphone, welcoming everyone and explaining the purpose of the benefit. She talked about the music program, about the kids who were learning to play instruments, about the importance of arts education. Then the first performer came out, a young cellist. She played beautifully, a piece by Bach. The audience clapped warmly when she finished. The second performer was a jazz singer with a pianist. They performed 2 songs, old standards from the 1940s. The audience loved them, clapping along with the rhythm. Then it was Marcus's turn. Helen introduced him. "Our next performer is Marcus Cole. Marcus is a pianist who studied at Juilliard. He'll be playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor." Marcus heard his cue. This was it. He had to walk out there. He had to do this. His legs felt like water as he walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. He couldn't see the audience clearly, just a mass of people sitting in the darkness beyond the lights. There were so many of them. 200 people. 200 people watching him. Marcus walked to the piano and sat down. His hands were shaking so badly that he had to put them in his lap for a moment. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The fear was overwhelming. It was just like before, just like his senior recital. He couldn't do this. He couldn't play. In the audience, Sarah sat in her seat and watched with surprise. It was him, the street performer from 3rd Avenue. She had bought a ticket to this concert without knowing he would be here. What was he doing performing at a benefit concert? Sarah leaned forward, watching Marcus carefully. She could see that he was nervous. His hands were shaking. He looked scared. Come on, she thought. You can do this. Marcus stared at the piano keys. They blurred in his vision. His mind was blank. He couldn't remember how the piece started. He couldn't remember anything. This was it. He was going to fail. Again. In front of all these people. But then, somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Helen's voice. Focus on the music. Let everything else fall away. The music, not the audience. Not the fear. Just the music. Marcus closed his eyes. He heard the Rachmaninoff in his head. Those dark, beautiful opening chords. The melody that said everything he had ever felt. The music that had carried him through the darkest times. He thought about his mother who had loved to hear him play. He thought about the years on the street corner, invisible and alone. He thought about Helen, who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. He thought about the music, always the music, the one thing that had never left him. Marcus opened his eyes. He placed his hands on the keys, and he began to play. The opening chords rang out, powerful and dark. Marcus's hands stopped shaking. They moved with confidence, with certainty. The music poured out of him. He forgot about the audience. He forgot about his fear. There was only the music, only the piano, only this moment. His hands flew across the keys, pulling out every emotion, every nuance of the piece. He played with power and delicacy, with darkness and light. The difficult passage in the middle came, and Marcus played through it smoothly. His fingers knew what to do. His body knew what to do. All those hours of practice had prepared him. In the audience, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. She had walked past this man every day for years. She had heard him play on his street corner. But this was different. This was transcendent. This was a man pouring his entire soul into the music. Other people in the audience were crying too. Some sat with their eyes closed, lost in the music. Some sat very still, barely breathing. The performance hall was completely silent except for the piano. Marcus played the final section with growing intensity. The music built and built, getting louder, more powerful. Then it came to the final chords, heavy and final, like the closing of a door or the ending of a story. Marcus lifted his hands from the keys. The last notes faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The entire audience sat in stillness as if they couldn't quite believe what they had just heard. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then everyone was on their feet, applauding, the sound like thunder filling the hall. Marcus sat at the piano, stunned. They were giving him a standing ovation. All of them. 200 people standing and clapping for him. He had done it. He had actually done it. Marcus stood up and bowed, his legs shaky. The applause continued. He looked out into the audience, and for the first time he could see their faces. They were smiling. Some were still crying. They had connected with the music. They had heard what he was trying to say. He bowed again and walked off the stage. As soon as he was backstage, his legs gave out and he had to sit down on the floor. He was shaking all over, but not from fear this time. From relief, from joy. From the incredible feeling of having done something he thought he could never do again. Helen found him there a few minutes later. She sat down on the floor next to him and put her arm around his shoulders. "You were magnificent," she said. Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded. After the concert ended, there was a reception in the lobby. Marcus stood awkwardly, not sure what to do. But people kept coming up to him. They wanted to shake his hand, to tell him how much they loved his performance, to ask questions about his training and his life. One older man said, "I've heard that piece performed by famous pianists in major concert halls, but I've never heard it played with as much emotion as you played it tonight." A young girl, maybe 12 years old, came up to him shyly. "That was beautiful," she said. "I'm learning piano, too. You made me want to practice more." Marcus felt his eyes getting wet. "Keep practicing," he told her. "Music is worth it." Sarah finally worked up the courage to approach him. Marcus recognized her immediately. "You walk past my corner every day," he said. Sarah nodded. "I do. I had no idea you could play like this. I mean, I knew you were good, but this was—" She couldn't find the words. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "I'm glad I did," Sarah said. "You're remarkable. I hope you know that." Later, after most people had left, Helen introduced Marcus to a few people from the local music community. One was the director of a small music school. "We're always looking for teachers," she said. "If you're interested, we should talk." Another was a man who organized concerts at community centers and small venues around the city. "I'd love to have you perform," he said. "Nothing huge, just intimate concerts for people who love music." Marcus took their business cards, still feeling dazed. An hour ago, he had been a street performer that nobody noticed. Now people were offering him opportunities, treating him like a real musician. When everyone had gone except Helen, Marcus sat down on one of the velvet seats in the empty hall. Helen sat next to him. "This doesn't mean your life will completely change overnight," she said gently. "You'll still have to work. You'll still have struggles. But you've taken the first step. You've proven to yourself that you can do this." "I know," Marcus said. "I'm not expecting to become famous or rich, but maybe I can teach some students. Maybe I can perform sometimes at small venues. Maybe I can be part of the music community again." "That sounds like a good plan," Helen said. Marcus looked around the empty performance hall. "Thank you," he said, "for believing in me, for giving me this chance. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped at my corner that day." "You would have figured it out eventually," Helen said. "The music was always in you, Marcus. I just helped you remember it." 3 months later, Marcus still played on his street corner most days. He still needed the money. But now it was different. Now he played with confidence, with joy. He played classical pieces as often as pop songs. People stopped to listen more often. His tip jar filled up faster. But Marcus also had students now. 4 kids who came to the community center twice a week to learn piano from him. He taught them with patience and care, remembering what it felt like to be young and excited about music. And once a month, he performed at a small concert series that the man from the reception had organized. Just small venues, coffee shops, and community centers, audiences of 20 or 30 people. But Marcus loved it. Each performance helped him heal a little more, helped him believe in himself a little more. Sarah still walked past Marcus's corner every day, but now she always stopped to listen for a minute. Sometimes she and Marcus would talk briefly about music or the weather or nothing in particular. They had become friendly acquaintances, connected by music and by that one remarkable night at the concert. On a cold morning in January, Marcus sat at his street piano and played a piece by Chopin. A woman stopped to listen with her young daughter. The little girl watched Marcus's fingers move across the keys with wide eyes. "Mommy, I want to learn to play piano," the girl said. The mother smiled and put a $5 bill in Marcus's tip jar. "Maybe we can make that happen," she told her daughter. Marcus finished the piece and smiled at them. "Music is a good thing to learn," he told the little girl. "It stays with you your whole life." After they left, Marcus sat quietly for a moment. The street was busy with people rushing to work. Cars drove past. The city hummed with noise and activity. But Marcus felt peaceful. He felt like he had found his place. He wasn't a famous concert pianist. He wasn't rich. He still lived in a small room and struggled to pay his bills. But he was a musician. He was teaching, playing, sharing the thing he loved most with the world. And that was enough. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and began to play again. The music floated out over the busy street, a small, beautiful sound in the middle of the chaos. Some people stopped to listen. Some people walked past without noticing. But Marcus played on because that was what he did. That was who he was. A musician who had lost his way and found it again. A street performer who had discovered that sometimes the simplest moments could lead to the most extraordinary changes. The music continued, note by note, day by day, a life rebuilt one song at a time.